She was shaking. Not from the cold. Not from the crowd of 90,000 people screaming around her. She was shaking because he was standing right there. 6 years older, 6 years colder, 6 years more devastating, and he was looking at her like she had never left. Like those 6 years were nothing. Like she owed him an explanation she didn't have words for. Cynthia Udoka pressed her back against the stadium railing at the 2026 FIFA World Cup in Los Angeles and told herself to breathe. She told herself he hadn't seen her. She told herself the universe was not this cruel, this poetic, this reckless. Then Kwon Jae-won turned his head. And their eyes locked across the chaos. And Cynthia's entire carefully rebuilt life came apart in 4 seconds. Here is what you need to know about these two people. Here is what nobody tells you about the kind of love that refuses to die. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with warnings. It finds you in the middle of a packed stadium in a foreign country and it grabs you by the throat and it says, "You never finished this. Stay with me. Because this story is going to break something open inside you." Welcome to Afro-K romance fairy tale, where love speaks every language and the heart always finds its way home. Today's story is tender, it is real, and it is going to stay with you long after the last scene. If you are new here, you are so welcome. Subscribe, hit the bell, and never miss another story. Share this with someone who deserves something beautiful today. And drop your city in the comments, because every single person watching right now is part of something special. Now let's begin. Seoul 2020. The world was sick and scared and shutting itself down. Borders were closing. Airports were ghost towns. And Cynthia Udoka, 22 years old, fresh out of Lagos, carrying a scholarship letter and her mother's prayers folded inside her jacket pocket, landed at Incheon International Airport with absolutely no idea that she was about to walk into the most dangerous love story of her life. She wasn't nervous. That was the thing about Cynthia. She should have been nervous. She was thousands of miles from home, in a country where she didn't speak the language, during a global pandemic that had the entire planet gripped in fear. But Cynthia Udoka walked through those arrival gates with her chin up and her eyes wide open and this smile. This devastating, full, generous smile that made strangers feel like they had known her forever. She was beautiful in a way that asked nothing of anyone. Radiant. The kind of woman whose presence in a room shifted the entire temperature of it. But what made Cynthia truly extraordinary was not what she looked like. It was who she was. She gave freely, naturally, without calculation. She shared her last ramen with a crying Korean freshman she had just met. She organized food collections for campus cleaning staff. She learned enough Korean in 3 months to comfort an elderly woman who had gotten lost near Sinchon Station. Yonsei University had never seen anything like her. And neither had Kwon Jae-won. He was 30 years old the first time he saw her. He was crossing the east courtyard of the campus. Not as a student, not as a professor, but as a man who owned significant pieces of that neighborhood and had come to deal with a problem quietly, when he heard laughter. Real laughter. The kind that has no performance in it. He turned. And there she was. Dancing. Alone. In the middle of a masked, socially distanced, silent campus. Cynthia Udoka was dancing to Whisket through her earphones, completely unbothered, completely free, her head wrap catching the October wind. Jae-won stopped walking. His 2 bodyguards stopped behind him. Nobody said anything. He watched her for longer than he should have. Then he turned around and left and said nothing to no one. But something had shifted. Something quiet and tectonic. Something that his entire life of discipline and control had not prepared him for. He asked about her. Discreetly. The way he asked about everything. Through channels that left no trace. He learned her name in 24 hours. He learned her scholarship details, her home address in Lagos, her major, her family background. He learned everything about Cynthia Udoka the way a dangerous man learns about a potential threat. Except she wasn't a threat. She was something far more terrifying. She was good. And here is the first thing you need to hold on to. Jae-won did not approach her. Not immediately. Not the way you might expect a powerful man to move when he wants something. He watched. He waited. He made certain she was safe. And he told himself that was all it was. He was lying to himself. He just didn't know it yet. Started with a book. Cynthia had left her advanced economics textbook on a bench outside the campus library. She realized 20 minutes later, ran back, and found it exactly where she left it, except now there was a yellow sticky note pressed to the cover. No name. No number. Just 4 words written in perfect English. You argue well, Cynthia. She looked around. The courtyard was empty. She stood there holding that note for a long time, her heart doing something strange and unfamiliar in her chest. She had never seen anyone write her name like that before. Like it mattered. Like it deserved to be handled carefully. She asked around campus. Nobody knew anything. She told herself it was nothing. But she kept the note. That was November 2020. And over the following weeks, something impossible began happening. Small things. The aggressive senior student who had been making her campus life uncomfortable. He transferred faculties without explanation. The landlord at her off-campus apartment who had been threatening to raise her rent during a pandemic. He called her personally, apologized, and reduced it instead. A full bag of Nigerian food items. Oji, ugwa seeds, crayfish, the exact things her mother had written in a letter she had never shown anyone, appeared outside her apartment door on a Tuesday morning. Cynthia was not a foolish woman. She knew these things were connected. What she did not know was what to do with that knowledge. Then one evening in December, the power went out in the library. Every student packed up and left in the cold darkness. Cynthia stayed. She had a deadline and a small torch and absolutely no intention of going anywhere. She was deep in her notes when she heard the door open. She looked up, and Kwon Jae-won walked in. No bodyguards this time. Just him. Dark coat. Quiet eyes. The kind of man who carried authority in his posture without performing it. He looked at her like he had expected to find her exactly there, doing exactly that. You should go home, he said. His English was precise, deliberate. You should mind your business, she said back, without missing a beat. He blinked. Nobody said that to Jae-won. Ever. And then, against every instinct, against every rule he had built his life around, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Teach me what you are working on, he said. Cynthia looked at him for a long moment. Something in his eyes was not asking. But something else in his eyes, something buried deep and almost invisible, was almost pleading. She turned her textbook around and pushed it toward him. Chapter 7, she said. Try not to fall behind. That was the night everything changed. They talked until 2 a.m. About economics, about Seoul, about Lagos, about her family, about what she wanted to build when she went back home. He said very little about himself. But he listened to her the way people listen to music they have been searching for without knowing it. Completely, quietly, like he was memorizing every word in case she disappeared. She walked home alone that night because he insisted on calling her a car without explanation. She didn't argue, but she thought about his eyes the whole way back. By January 2021, they had a rhythm. It was unspoken, unofficial, a study corner that became theirs. Evening walks along Han River that neither of them ever formally proposed but both always showed up for. He would bring her roasted chestnuts from a vendor 3 streets away. She would bring him arguments and opinions and stories about Nigeria that made him laugh in a way his associates had never witnessed. He laughed differently with her. He was different with her. Jae-won, she said one evening, watching the river reflect the city lights. Who are you when nobody is looking? He was quiet for a long time. I am looking for that person, he finally said. Cynthia turned and studied his face. There was something underneath all that composure. Something tender and locked away. She reached over without thinking and placed her hand over his. He looked down at her hand on his. He did not move. He did not speak. But something in his jaw shifted, and for just one unguarded second, one single devastating second, Kwon Jae-won looked like a man who had been surviving for years and had just been reminded what it felt like to be alive. He turned his hand over slowly and held hers back. That was it. That was the moment. No dramatic declaration. No sweeping gesture. Just two hands holding each other by the Han River in the cold January air of 2021, while Seoul moved loudly and carelessly around them. But here is what Cynthia did not know that night. Here is the part that changes everything. 3 days earlier, Jae-won had received a direct order from the highest authority in his organization. A command he had never once disobeyed in 10 years. Cut all outside ties. All of them. Or face consequences. He had said nothing to Cynthia. He had shown up to their Han River walk anyway. And now he was sitting here, holding her hand, making a choice that no one in his world had ever survived making. February 2021 arrived, and Cynthia Udoka was falling in love. She didn't announce it. She didn't journal about it or confess it to friends. She simply noticed it in the quiet, unavoidable way you notice the sun has come up. Not dramatically, just undeniably. She noticed it in the way her mornings felt different. In the way she caught herself smiling at nothing while making tea. In the way her chest did something complicated every time she saw his name light up her phone screen. He texted like he spoke. Economically. Precisely. But always at the exact moment she needed it. Are you eating properly? Not a question. A statement. Command wrapped in care. My mother sent me augury and I burned the soup trying to be creative, she typed back. 3 seconds passed. I'm sending food. Jae-won, I do not need you to. It is already ordered. She laughed so hard she knocked her chair back. And then she sat there in her small apartment with her burned soup and her phone against her chest, and she thought, this man. This impossible, confusing, devastating man. What was she supposed to do with him? What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that Jae-won was having a completely different internal crisis. He had never been in love before. Not once. In 30 years of living he had been feared, respected, obeyed, and occasionally admired. But loved. Softened. Made to feel like the world outside one person's orbit was just background noise. Never. He had built himself deliberately against exactly this. Love was vulnerability. Vulnerability was weakness. Weakness was how empires fell. And yet, every morning he woke up and his first coherent thought was Cynthia. Not his organization. Not his enemies. Not the empire his father had handed him soaked in blood and obligation. Cynthia. Her laugh. Her arguments. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking. The way she called him out without flinching. This woman who had no idea the things he was capable of and somehow made him want to be capable of something entirely different. He told her on a Thursday evening in late February. Not with a grand declaration. Jae-won was not built for grand declarations. He told her the way he did everything. Quietly, directly, and without the option of taking it back. They were at Han River again. Their spot. The city humming behind them. Cynthia. I need to tell you something and I need you to hear it properly. She turned to look at him. Something in his voice made her go still. I have never wanted to protect something the way I want to protect you, he said. I have never wanted to be different for anyone. I'm not saying I am a good man. I'm saying you make me want to be one. And I do not know what to do with that. Silence. Cynthia stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes were doing that thing, filling slowly, not spilling, just filling, the way eyes do when something true lands directly in the center of the chest. You are the most terrifying person I have ever met, she whispered. I know, he said. And somehow you are also the safest place I have ever been. Jae-won did not look away from her. That was the first thing. He did not flinch, did not deflect, did not reach for the cold composure that had carried him through every dangerous moment of his adult life. He stood in that dark room with the photographs between them, and he let her see him. Fully. Without armor. It started as intelligence, he said. That is the truth. My organization had concerns about foreign students connected to certain scholarship programs. You were flagged. I was asked to look into you. Cynthia's jaw tightened. I was flagged. Yes. I was a 22-year-old girl from Lagos on an economics scholarship, and your people flagged me. Yes. He didn't soften it. And within 48 hours I knew you were completely clean. No connections. No agenda. Nothing. The file should have been closed. But I kept reading it. His voice dropped. Not because of the organization. Because of you. Because every page told me something that made me want to know the next thing. Cynthia, you were extraordinary on paper. Before I ever saw your face. Before the courtyard. I already knew who you were. The silence that followed was enormous. Cynthia stood up slowly. She walked to the window. Seoul glittered below, indifferent and bright, knowing nothing about the two people fracturing quietly above it. You had photographs of my family, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. To protect them. The moment I knew my feelings were becoming what they became, I had people watching your family in Lagos. Not to threaten. To protect. If anything about me ever put you in danger, they would have been the first ones I moved to safety. He turned around. Do you understand how that sounds? Yes. It sounds like control, Jae-won. It sounds like you decided something about my life without asking me. It was never about control. And for the first time his composure cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. It was the only way I knew how to love something. I have spent my entire life in a world where the people you care about become targets. Where loving someone openly is an invitation for your enemies to destroy them. I did not know another way. I only knew keep her safe. Keep her safe. Keep her safe. His voice broke on the last one. Just barely. But it broke. And Cynthia heard it. She stood there looking at this man. This powerful, dangerous, terrifying man who was standing in his own apartment completely undone, and felt something complicated move through her. She was still angry. She wanted to hold the anger. She needed to hold it. But she had also heard the truth in his voice. Not excuses. Not manipulation. Just a man who had learned love in the only language his brutal world had ever taught him. She crossed the room slowly. She stopped in front of him. I am not done being upset, she said clearly. I know, he said. And you are going to have to earn this back. I know. And if you ever make a decision about my life or my family without telling me again, I will walk out of a door and this time I will mean it. He looked at her for a long moment. Something raw and grateful and almost boyish moved across his face. Understood, he said softly. She reached up and placed her palm flat against his chest. Right over his heart. I can feel it, she said quietly. You know that. I can feel your heart going crazy right now. He exhaled. Long and slow. You are the only person alive who has ever made it do that, he said. And she leaned in and rested her head against his chest and he wrapped both arms around her. Completely, carefully, like she was the one thing in his entire empire he could not afford to lose, and they stood there in the dark for a very long time. That should have been enough. That moment should have been the turning point where love won cleanly and the story smoothed out into something beautiful and uncomplicated. But the universe had one more thing to say. 2 weeks later Cynthia received the phone call from Lagos. Her father had collapsed. Kidney failure. Her mother's voice on the phone was the most frightened sound she had ever heard. Her younger brother was trying to manage alone and failing. Her family needed her. Not eventually, not soon now. She booked her flight that same night. When she told Jae-won she was leaving, she watched something happen to his face that she had never seen before and hoped never to see again. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness exactly. It was something quieter and more devastating than both. It was resignation. Like some part of him had always known. Like some part of him had been waiting for the world to remind him that people like Cynthia, generous, luminous, selfless people, did not get to stay in dark places forever. They belonged to the light. And he was not the light. He drove her to Incheon Airport himself. He carried her bags. He did not cry. He was not built for crying. But at the departure gate he cupped her face in both hands and looked at her for a very long time, memorizing her the way a man memorizes something he is terrified of forgetting. Come back to me, he said. It was the closest thing to begging he had ever done in his life. Cynthia pressed her lips to his jaw. Take care of yourself, Jae-won. She walked through those gates. She did not look back. Not because she didn't want to, but because she knew, she absolutely knew, that if she turned around and saw his face one more time, she would never leave. And her family needed her to leave. So she kept walking. And Kwon Jae-won stood at that gate alone. And waited. For 6 years. June 2026. Los Angeles. The FIFA World Cup had turned the city into something electric and delirious. Flags from every nation. Songs in 40 languages. 90,000 people packed into one stadium. All of them certain that the most important thing happening in that building was the football match. They were wrong. Cynthia Udoka was 30 years old now, and she had built something real. Her father had recovered. Slowly, painfully, but fully. She had spent 5 years working in Lagos, building a small but respected economic consulting firm, carrying her family through the hardest seasons of their lives. She had done it the way she did everything. Quietly, completely, without asking for applause. She had also spent 5 years trying to stop thinking about Seoul. She had almost succeeded. Almost. She was wearing green and gold that evening, laughing with a colleague 3 rows from the pitch, completely present and completely alive, when the noise of the crowd shifted around her the way noise does when something invisible changes in a room. She felt it before she saw it. That particular weight. That specific stillness in the middle of chaos. A turn. Kwon Jae-won was standing 40 feet away. He was in a charcoal suit that had no business being in a football stadium. He was older, 36 now, something more defined and more dangerous carved into him by the years. He was turned slightly away, speaking to someone beside him, and Cynthia had exactly 3 seconds to decide whether to disappear into the crowd before he turned around. She took 1 second too long. He turned, and the world stopped. Not metaphorically, not poetically. The world actually seemed to pause. The noise dulled, the crowd blurred at the edges, and there was only this. 40 feet of charged air between 2 people who had spent 6 years pretending they were fine. He went very still. She forgot how to breathe. Then he said something to the person beside him, who immediately stepped back, and Jae-won began walking toward her. Slowly, deliberately. The way he did everything, like he had already decided, and the only remaining formality was arrival. Cynthia stood her ground. "You're here," he said. His voice was exactly the same. Low. Precise. It landed in her chest exactly the same way it always had. "Nigeria is playing," she said. Because she needed to say something ordinary. She needed the ground under her feet to feel real. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more intimate than a smile. "I know," he said. "I saw the fixture 6 months ago." Cynthia went still. Jae-won. "I told myself I was here for business." His eyes didn't leave hers. "I have been telling myself a lot of things for 6 years." She felt her throat tighten. "You look," he started. "Don't," she whispered. "Cynthia. If you say it, I am going to fall apart in the middle of this stadium, and I refuse to do that." He stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the exact texture of the 6 years in his eyes. The discipline. The loneliness. The thing he had been carrying that had no name but that she recognized instantly because she had been carrying the same thing. "My father died," he said quietly. 2 years ago. The organization, there were changes. Things shifted. "I am not what I was, Cynthia. I am not completely free. But I am freer than I have ever been." She looked at him. "I'm sorry about your father. I wanted to call you. Every day for 2 years I wanted to call you. Why didn't you?" "Because you deserved a life that wasn't complicated by me." His jaw worked. "Because I loved you enough to leave you alone. And I was wrong. Cynthia, I spent 6 years being wrong about that." A tear escaped before she could stop it. He caught it with his thumb. His hand against her face again. After 6 years, after everything. And it felt like no time had passed and like an entire lifetime had passed, both at once. "I never stopped," she admitted. Her voice was barely sound. "I tried, Jae-won. I genuinely tried." "So did I," he said. "I was very bad at it." She laughed. Wet and overwhelmed and completely real. He pulled her in slowly, giving her every opportunity to step back, and she did not step back. She pressed her face into his shoulder and his arms came around her, and they held each other in the middle of 90,000 people who had absolutely no idea that the most significant reunion of the evening had nothing to do with football. He pressed his lips to her temple. "Come back," he murmured into her hair. "Not to Seoul. Not to what it was. Just come back to me. We build something new. Something that belongs to both of us." She pulled back just enough to look at his face. "You waited 6 years," she said. "I would have waited 60, he said simply. And Cynthia Udoka, who had spent 6 years being strong and selfless and endlessly giving, finally let herself receive something. She kissed him. Right there. In the stadium. In the noise and the light and the beautiful chaos of a world that had tried very hard to keep them apart. He kissed her back like a man who had been holding his breath for 6 years and had finally remembered how to exhale. Some loves do not die when you leave. Some loves simply wait. Quietly, stubbornly, with a patience that embarrasses time itself. Cynthia and Jae-won did not have an easy love. They had a real one. And real love, it turns out, does not need perfect conditions. It only needs 2 people willing to choose each other again when the universe finally opens the door. Now I need to ask you something before you go. If someone waited 6 years for you without a single promise, would you go back? And do you think Cynthia was brave or reckless for walking back into his world a second time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you are not already here, because every week we bring you exactly this. Love that is complicated and real and worth every second. We will see you in the next one.